Someone told me.
Why don't we get started? Peggy's in her email said don't wait for her. So I guess we'll roll call.
Mr. McGreeny.
Here.
Ms. Fragrance. Ms. Hannah. Here. Mr. Milstein.
Here.
Mr. LaParo.
Here.
Mr. Martin. And Mr. Engel.
Yes. And did everybody get the minutes? I think they were sent to you by email. No.
Yes, they were all sent out.
I have not received them.
I didn't either, Joe.
Did you get?
I didn't look.
You didn't look. Okay. They were sent about what, 2 days
You-
ago?
Yeah, you got them.
I got them, I got them.
Well, I don't know why anybody else didn't get them. You're all in a group, so.
Dave, probably because of Lindstrom.
No, I've never received any emails on any of this at all, so, but.
Well, I have you, I have
Okay.
Idra, well, we'll check your email address, because I have everybody grouped. So obviously, they're not sent individual, it's a group. So we'll check those emails.
Right, and our.
You didn't get one either?
Well, my computer's older than mine, so I may have trouble getting some.
But you got all the other stuff. You got all the charter stuff that I
Yeah.
sent you?
No, all I got is the date change.
Let me ask this question, did you get the prior information as it related to like Hudson and other things that were sent?
I sent all the charters out,
I've never received anything by email, ever.
well, we'll have to check your email,
Maybe-
because I have everybody.
How about you, Tina? Did you?
I don't remember.
Do you want to get their email address now, or are you just
I
going
know
to
I
check
got
and
the,
make sure that?
The meeting's
See if I got
canceled
another
or
business
something,
card in
and
here that I can.
Peggy's not gonna be here till later, I remember those things.
Well, I forwarded Peggy's email to everyone.
I got
And
that.
included in that was attachments. I said, thank you, Peggy, and then I attached the minutes, and
Yeah, that's what I have. In fact, I might even have it on my phone here.
Okay.
Steal my Jam's cards.
All right, well, why don't we'll approve the minutes next meeting. I suppose
again, they're
that
just
makes it-
transcriptions, so you can.
Yeah. All right, where we left off last time was we finished the first 4 sections, and I think we're going to be starting now. Oh, here's Peggy. Hi, Peggy. Okay, we talked a little bit about Mayor's Court, Article 5. Yes.
No, I'm looking at this is not the one that was given me.
I don't know what was given to you.
Yeah, I'll share that, that's not the one that was given to me, so you're not in this, I can tell you that right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, I think we had some discussion about Mayor's Court, Article 5 last time.
I have it right here, by the way.
What?
The email from Josephine, just so that,
Okay.
we have, David, you're on here, Tina, you're on here, Ken's on here, let me see what David, your email, David, was, it's steinec@hotmail.
Yes, that's another email for me.
Yeah, that's where it was
the one
sent.
I have.
Yeah, I
But
have,
this is what you prefer.
I don't have a preference. Clearly, that email is not working and I'm not getting anything there.
Okay.
'Cause I
I'm
checked
gonna
it.
put both.
Yeah. Tina, yours is Tina Hanna at hotmail.com?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's on here as well. So,
Okay. And Chuck, you've got stuff in the past, right? You
Yeah.
just might have a problem with your system.
Yeah, he answers me back.
Oh, it's okay.
Well, that's, but it's usually brief.
She sets them up, I knock them down. All right, let's move on. Mayor's Court, we had some discussion last week about in Mayor's Court, and I think we kind of concluded that there could be a change by a council, by legislation, if they wanted to do away with it. And so, if my memory right, we decided that there really wasn't anything to address on Mayor's Court, or does somebody have anything else they wanted to do?
I did, I copied Josephine in.
Okay.
Okay, I just thought if we're gonna try to do that separation of powers, mayor's court decision to have it or not is a policy decision and should be addressed by council, rather than the mayor. If the council wants to consider, Having a mayor's court, they should. If they wanna eliminate it, they should. Council should have that power, not just the mayor, and that's what our current charter says.
Well, you know what I would only suggest is that, you know, first of all, we've obviously been talking a whole lot about separating powers, but I think it needs to be qualified. I mean, if it's revenue neutral, if it's losing money, there's no question that it should, you know, they should make major consideration in making that change. But I think that they need to look at it, they need to leave the mayor have some ability to make those changes. But I'm not gonna argue this situation with, you know, the issue right now. I mean, I think it's something we should talk about down.
I'd just like to put it on the list for further
Yeah,
consideration.
It's on the list that you
If
sent
we're
out.
gonna do it that
Alright,
way, then
sure.
let's do it
Alright.
that way, but.
I'm curious, is that the way in the charter because the ORC provides for mayors to have mayor's court? Is that the genesis?
You know what, I think if you guys remember from 1962, when the mayor was first started, the mayor had 100% of the power because that's the way it was set up. We had a very, very, very strong mayor back then, and so the mayor had all the control, but does that make sense to do that
Well,
now?
I'm just wondering the genesis of even the terminology.
Well, I think
Because
the villages
whole
had
of
the
us,
right
you know.
to, in the ORC, to have a mayor's court.
When it says a municipal corporation, it does not identify by village.
I know, but generally you've got, you know, in Boston Heights, you've got your Glenwilla, you've got your Lindales, all villages who had that power of a mayor's
I
court.
just wondered if that was the
Just,
genesis.
if it makes sense, it makes sense. If it doesn't, it
I
doesn't.
just said it ain't broke, leave it alone.
Okay. All right, let's move on then to, unless somebody has any more comments, to Article 5.
Could I just go
Looking at-
back to something that Peggy had asked the last time? Just, all right,
Yeah.
you had asked, under, this? Or you had stated under, by ordinance, the word by ordinance, okay, introduce, for special meetings by ordinance, okay. Sorry. For me to go back.
Yeah, I remember that, I saw that.
Oh, I think, under the line, it just looked like it was missing
Okay.
something?
It
Is
was.
that what you were referencing?
And I said I vaguely remember something, vague being the operative word, but in 1994 it was amended, and this is the reason it was, if that interests you. It was amended, and the ordinance prior, the charter prior to that, just said in accordance with state law. And the reason it was changed to ordinance, it says, because as this language presently reads, we are mandated to follow the state requirements verbatim. On the other hand, we have a rather extensive ordinance addressing open meetings and our ordinances too. That may be amended from time to time and may even presently conflict with state law. This amendment would allow us to abide by our ordinance, avoid any unnecessary challenges, and better protect the rights of our citizens. So that's the reason it was put on there. So that just answers your question. You could do anything you want with it, but
Just
it's
wanted
the
to
same.
make sure I wasn't missing something, you know,
Um,
it just, so rather than, and it's just immaterial, so a lot of the charters say that you can have executive sessions in accordance with state law.
Right.
You don't have to go to state law, we have our own ordinance because we've already done
And it
that
almost
change.
kind of mirrors it, but
Right.
I mean, that one, I would, you know,
So that's a good example, the state law recently changed to allow executive sessions for economic development purposes. So does do we have to change
We
our,
were just talking about that today at NOPEC, yeah.
and so our ordinance needs to be amended to allow for that, or do we
I
automatically?
think you ought to fall, I think you fall under state law as far as I'm concerned.
But that's really not what our charter says, so.
Yeah. Well,
Well, this
but it's absent that too, though, because when you call it an executive session, it doesn't refer to employees or legal matters. It's you know,
Well, you can
now
only
it's
call for certain
economic development, which has opened up another
Well,
area, if you will.
I think when they call executive session now, it's for only 3 reasons.
Well, but now it's
It's
now it's
6 or
economic
7.
development issues. So the state legislature has put that in there as an item
That was
to which
actually
you
a
can
year and a half
need an
ago.
executive, yeah.
Peggy, what line if you want to?
I'm on a line 334
That's what I.
and 339. Well, whatever, check with Joe if you guys want to, I want to be able to allow council to have executive sessions for all the purposes that are allowed by law. including economic development, so as long as that works for me. I'm not asking to make a change, I'm just making sure it's correct.
I think that's a good one, actually, believe it or not, is because, you know, the competition amongst communities that are vying for businesses, there may be issues that you have that you don't wanna share.
Absolutely, and when your clients, you know, your business people, they don't want it out there public, they want it.
Sure.
That was all, I was just mentioning.
Okay.
No, that's all right. It's probably a good idea.
Yeah,
So we
no,
got it
I-
on the list? All right.
Yeah,
Okay, we ready to go to 6, which is Department of Finance? Does anybody think that, having read it over the week, that we need to make changes, or there are problems with this issue?
Well, unless somebody has something before 607, we still refer to an auditor. And obviously, we don't use the auditor anymore. We use, I think everything should come out of the Department of Finance and Director of Finance. So I'm not sure we need that. I'm not sure why we haven't removed it in the past. We haven't used it for years. Just a conversation about it.
I could understand if at some point in time there was a real problem with the finance department where people might want to have a qualified accountant go in and audit the books. So
Well, that's kind of what we do with the state auditor's office. I'm not sure we need that in our charter. I don't know.
Yeah, I understand, but it's just, the question is, if it's not there, then do we have the right to go in and audit the books? I don't know, it's never been an issue. All right, let's put down 607 as, should it be stricken? Is it redundant?
I'm suggesting that we delete 607 in its entirety, but obviously
Right.
open to more conversation and could be reviewed by the law department.
I believe that is referring to the state auditor that comes in annually, and then they can do special audits in addition to that.
Yeah, but we don't need that in the charter to do that. If the council wants to do it, or, you know, they can appropriate that money and go ahead and contact the auditor, which is a standard procedure.
What's in, do you remember what's in either Twinsburg's and or Hudson about the auditor of Brecksville? Yeah, I didn't compare that. Do you think that other communities are pulling that out, by the way?
Well,
'Cause
I
this is
think-
probably based on state law initially.
If you're a statutory community, you have an auditor. By law, you have an election, and I think it's like a leftover section. Would my guess be?
I don't disagree with you. I think you may be right on point about removing it, but,
how does it say by ordinance though?
um,
P by ordinance. If that were the case, if it's supposed to be like the state auditor, why would it say made by ordinance?
council may by ordinance make such provisions for the employment of a qualified accountant to audit the books. I mean, we have the auditor that comes in probably every 2 years, maybe not necessarily every year, depending on if you've
They
got.
come in every year.
They come in every year.
They're coming in every year, well, so they're coming in every year, and, well, initially, they would come in over, if you had grant monies that you received, then that's why they came in. It used to be where they would come in every couple of years, so they're coming in.
Based on your budget size. They changed it, so it's based on your budget.
I don't think they do a complete audit.
Well, it depends. No, when the state auditor comes in annually, they do a complete audit.
Well, actually, they do a lip test of each spot check,
Right,
yeah.
right. But then, let's look at the second line of this. It says, council may by ordinance make such provisions for employment of a qualified accountant to audit the books of the Department of Finance, okay? So if we wanna keep it in, shouldn't it say the city of the entire city, not just the Department of Finance?
Well, because the auditor's basically doing the financial books of the city, which is going to be in the finance department.
But that's not what it says. It says technically the Department of Finance. So the Department of Public Safety, Service is different than the Department of Finance.
But doesn't the finance department keep the books for all of them?
I think that's probably where it's coming
I
from.
know. If we're gonna keep it in, let's just make sure it covers the whole city.
That's fine.
But anyway, just,
Okay. Any other thoughts on the Department of Finance?
okay. But this is, if we're gonna do this separate, and this is for think thought, and then we'll come back to it, later, is if we're gonna separate the powers that we talked about, then I think the council needs to appoint the department head, no question about that. But should the council actually be involved in every single employee of every department? For example, and I just will do this generically one time so we don't have to go back to
Right.
it, but under the staff of the finance department, if the finance director hires us, I'm on 608, which is line 494. It
But
should,
it says it, no, is what you're saying, it says it in all.
in all the
Yeah.
sections.
Yeah.
You know, like even the rec department, you know what, we hire a lifeguard, and you have to appoint the council has to appoint lifeguards. You know, shouldn't the department head and the mayor just appoint their staff? I could
So are you
understand.
are you suggesting that the council should not confirm appointments?
No, I am suggesting that council should, confirm appointments of the directors and deputy directors. But anybody below a deputy or an assistant, not relative to civil service or police and fire, everybody else, that council should not necessarily have to appoint a payroll clerk or a lifeguard.
But Peggy, you fail to realize, and I've been through it long enough, if you can do that, you appoint me and I'm your son or niece or nephew, who's gonna stop it?
Well, we have enough, there's enough laws about nepotism that I don't think that's gonna be an issue.
Well, there is
As
a
long
law.
as council is smart enough, and in the past few, some of these council people, excuse me, can't know 1 and 1 make 6, I'm sorry. Somebody's gotta watch what's going on, things have changed in the last 40 years, and there's enough documents to prove it. So that's my question, how do you prevent nepotism?
Well, don't we have that in here?
We have nepotism law.
How do we enforce
I mean,
it?
that's someone who violates that is in violation of the law.
Well, we have an instance in Macedonia, and correct me if I'm wrong, where there was an employee at the rec center who happened to be the son-in-law of the assistant director, who worked for the rec department, didn't like his job, left. They filled the job part-time with another person. Well, this guy decides he wants to come back, and he got back in. What was done? Nothing.
And he left.
Did he leave again?
So something
Well,
like.
I'm not familiar with that case, I'm just saying, and we could put it on the list.
I
and
think the
talk.
anti-nepotism laws say that you can't work for a department where your relative is your supervisor. It's not that-
Supervisor, yeah.
You can't, it
So
doesn't mean that you.
is that in our chart, charter,
It's
in our
in our-
codified?
it's in our, it's in our, employee, guidelines.
Well, I'm just thinking, I mean, do we really want our council to spend time with every single employee? How many do we have, 130?
Well,
in
as
the
long
city?
as council will address problems when they come up, like nepotism and, You may not
Well, you
know.
know, council can call out the issue if it occurs. And at that point in time, I mean, let's face it, that's an embarrassment if you wind up doing something that's not in accordance with the law. And not only is it an embarrassment, but it's gotta be corrected. That's my
Well, you
opinion.
know, Peggy, you remember when you were on council and something came up in the fire department, you left, right? You excused yourself, remember that? Because now, we have a council person whose wife is on the Parks Board, okay? He's never excused himself when something comes up from the parks, that's, see what I'm saying?
The Parks Board doesn't get paid, do they?
No, but they still are asking for money.
Well, anyway, that's why we have a law department, but anyway. I'm just throwing that out, you guys.
I mean, it's a good point. I mean, it's not one that we should just ignore, but I think that there's probably a handle for that that's already in place.
Has there ever been any issues with this? I guess from what I'm reading, the way it occurs is the mayor selects a new employee. And
Well,
then
I
council
think there's a-
confirms that employee and
Correct.
appropriates the
In a
money
sense,
for the position. Is that how that works?
Well, generally the appropriation will come first.
Okay. So has there ever been any issues around that? I
It's
mean,
been a couple.
I just thought it
What,
would
what,
be.
for example?
Well, there was several years ago, there was a appointment at the recreation center of a new employee, and I forget the reason, but I think council felt that he was overqualified, I can't remember. They didn't approve the appointment, the mayor hired him anyways, and then council, took the money out of the budget, he wasn't hired. I think that's the only situation I'm aware of where the employee wasn't hired. And maybe, and then there's the one that you were just discussing. And there was a vote, I see a hand moving in the background earlier this year where there was a vote related to that issue, where council voted not to appoint the person. But then the law department came up with a argument saying that one of the council members' votes was illegal because she had voiced her opinion, which I didn't understand the law, and therefore, since there was a tie, the mayor was allowed to break the tie, and the person got hired, who has since resigned. I don't really know.
Okay.
I think, let's look at the bigger picture one day, is do we really want council to approve every single person? I know at the rec center, we kind of eliminated that a while ago, but if we wanted to make things a little bit more efficient and give the mayor the power or the control, he or she is expected to run the city, the department heads are in charge of their department, they hire who they need to, based on the employment laws that are out there, either in our codified or in state law. You know, obviously you can't hire your wife, I mean, that's pretty clear. If somebody violates that, and that's what our law department should intervene in.
Shoulda, woulda, maybe didn't. So, you know,
I'm just looking out for the future.
looking out for the little people that see it
You know,
happen.
I don't disagree with Peggy. I think that the latitude needs to be given, and this goes back to the premise of what I said earlier at a prior meeting, where if you're gonna let the council legislate and the mayor administrate, then you gotta give the mayor some powers to be able to do what he needs to do within his budget and the framework that council gives him, because council controls the purse strings here. And they set a budget, and they say to the mayor, here's what you can spend in a given year. That's it, you know, unless you come back and get some additional approval. So, you know, you can't look at, and I've always said this, don't look at the individual that's in the position. Think about the operational aspect of it, and I think Peggy's hitting on a very, very important point of how the city should run in the future, regardless of who may be on council or who may be the administrator. And think about that as you proceed through these.
That's exactly where I was going, okay? And why I asked, have there been problems with this issue in the past? Clearly there has. There's been 3 issues, I guess you described. And,
Yeah, I think that
and so first of all, we can conclude from that this isn't working the way it's written. It's not working the way perhaps it was intended.
I mean, in one of the ones, the person wasn't hired ultimately because council then removed the funds. The one that we've talked about, the mayor hired the person based upon the law department's opinion, which then council had any further recourse, so I'm not sure if it doesn't work. It may not work perfectly, but
Yeah.
it does work.
I guess, I'm just asking if, yeah, I'm asking myself, is there value in having this in here? If ultimately the approach that council can use to exert or assert its influence is the financial issue.
On certain jobs they can, you know, on other jobs they probably can't, because, you know, you need a director, you need an assistant director, and things like that. I mean, I don't mind putting it on the list, I'm not saying that I think that it should change, I'm kind of sitting on the fence.
Let's see, again, who qualifies for what job? I'll give you a good example, it's on record. When Jim Crevar left, there was a position open for service director. The service director from Northfield, I got the evidence, sent his application, it was 10 times better than Jim's. They picked Jimmy because he worked here. I'm not saying that was right or wrong. Are you going by qualification, or?
You know, I'm gonna say something, because this is something that I think is very important. I think that Jimmy, who I hired
Yeah.
him, by the way.
Yeah.
Now we can place blame.
Yeah, you can
Just
put blame
kidding.
on me if you want
Just
to,
kidding.
but my point is that I, at some point or another, thought I made a mistake in hiring him. However, I think he has, by leaps and bounds, done a fantastic job now in this position.
Yeah.
And I think why he's able to do this is that the men that worked under him or worked in that department have a respect for him. When I hired Jim Crevar, who I thought Jim was a good guy overall, he never had the respect of the individuals that worked in the department. So they kind of just beat him up every day, and everything that he did, he could never win over. And you know that, Joe. You know that
It's
that's
a totally different personality.
personality. So sometimes hiring within, even if the person doesn't meet all of that necessary qualification that you may be looking for, he's certainly gonna get his men to do the job that they should be doing. And I think he's got them guys doing that. That's personally my feeling, because I can see what's going on the streets.
But that's what I'm saying, Joe, where do you decide if you have two people, who are you gonna hire, the best qualified or? what do you
Doesn't
think?
matter whoever
Well,
gets
you know
hired,
what?
because the mayor has the right to hire whoever.
The
he
discussion
wants.
here centers around the mayor doing that hiring and whether or not council should be approving it. And currently, they approve it, at least for direct, for all employees, right?
Except
Every
part-time
employee in the city?
Right.
Right.
Okay, and so Peggy brought up this idea that maybe we should limit that to just the directors and perhaps assistant directors. I don't understand how that affects anything you're talking about, let alone individual names of people. I mean, we're talking about positions here, not people.
I think,
I'll only interject that in regards to the recreation part, because there's like a, the aquatics, some of the lifeguards, that's a quick turnover, seasonal, because go back to school.
Summer,
That is not part of, something that comes to council regularly. That's not.
Okay.
And
I think that what Peggy is really pushing for, and which I agree with her, is that if you're gonna let the administrator administrate, then let him have the ability to administrate, and then the department heads that are hiring, that give them the ability to hire people within their operation, and council shouldn't be involved in that administrative portion of the operation of the city. If you really truly wanna create the division, that's a good way to do it. That's a good start, by the way. So,
let's
I'm
put it on
gonna
the
agree.
back burner and
We put it on the list, and I think we put it on the list for all parts of the charter, because it's in there 100 times, we
Right.
don't need to talk about it every time.
right.
And let's move on and try to finish tonight and get out there early. Because Joe needs to rest up to get his, have to be able to get on that flight.
I gotta get up at 4 o'clock in the morning.
And we feel very sorry about that, don't we?
Yeah, we sure do.
What is it, 75 in Florida?
I don't even know.
Who cares?
All right, so that's the staff. Anything else that you wanna discuss about in the finance department?
Well, the only other thing that I saw that was a little bit glaring to me is that, again, under that removal issue that we had previously discussed, it said that 4 of the majority or something of that effect.
Right.
I'm trying to think of how that was worded.
Right here, 499,
Was it 499?
is that what you're talking about, you still finance?
Yeah, the finance director, but it applies to, if you will, all
Right.
department heads, but that we need to correct, because if,
4 of 5 is required.
yeah, I mean, for, not only the finance director, I'm sorry, excuse me, I'm going back to the removal of a council member.
No,
No,
that,
no, you mean
I'm-
removal of the director.
No, I'm going back to the removal of a council member. I'm sorry, I should have qualified that. It says 4 of, you need 4 of the
Right,
5
should be.
and I
members.
think that was,
That should be 100%, because now what you're really saying, so you're not saying a simple majority of 3, you're saying 100%, because the person that's being accused can't
Right.
vote.
So you're saying it should be changed to 3.
That's right.
Right. And this one is 4, it's either the mayor
I,
or 3 or 4.
I mixed the two in my mind
Okay, that's fine.
together.
But I think we all agree, we're gonna make that consistent throughout. whenever we decide
Okay,
on
so
it.
that
But
consistency.
that has to do with a council.
Yeah, I understand, because technically, four out of the five, because the person can't vote for himself, is 100%, and 4 out of the 5 in the removal of the finance director is 80%.
So what should it be?
It should be majority.
Right.
Well,
I mean, that's what I'm
I
thinking.
think you're reading, I think there's two sections here. One says the removal, there's two methods of removal. Now we're in 609, and
Right.
we're, okay. One method is the mayor and majority, so that's 4 votes there. Then the second takes the mayor out of the equation, and it's 4 votes. So either way, you need 4 votes.
And it's always been that we need a
Oh,
supermajority.
yeah,
for the
even,
mayor and
even
the
the way it was
majority.
before. If there were 6 people, it needed the mayor and 4, or 5 of the council members.
Okay.
So there's really 2 methods, there's 2 different, things here.
Why a supermajority?
Because, well, I don't know, the way it was originally written, it was that the mayor wanted it, all he needed was to remove someone, all he needed was a majority of
That's
council.
what it says.
But if the mayor doesn't want that person removed, then you need a supermajority of council.
Well, I think it ought to be just flat out 3 out of 5, 4 out of 6, 5 out of 7, no percentages, no supermajority, no bilingual majority, any of that crap. Just regular, plain, you're out, by majority vote.
Even if the mayor doesn't want you.
No, I don't even care if the mayor has a vote,
I-
particularly.
I guess I,
Tina, remember, don't think about this mayor in office.
Oh, I'm not.
I guess that's where I'm
General.
coming from too. You need to think carefully about that relative to the distinction between elected officials, that is, council members and the mayor, versus hired employees that are hired and then confirmed by council.
I wasn't speaking about the council person part.
Okay, well, I
Sorry.
think that's what we were just talking about.
I'm sorry, council person.
Was this
Yeah, we
idea.
kinda moved on, we're back to employees.
Okay,
Now, department heads, employees, I'm gonna stick with 3 out of 5 and so on. No
So you-
percentage, no supermajority, no, none of this
It
stuff.
doesn't matter whether the mayor
That-
wants it or not, so that's.
No, doesn't matter at all.
It looks
Now,
like
council person, that's a different story, you guys can fight it out.
Right.
But for the regular folk, if someone needs replaced, there ought not be no slick lawyer talking how to do it. Plain English for people to understand.
Okay.
You can't misinterpret 3 out of 5 as a majority. You know, you just can't do it. There was so much talk about 2/3 and 3/4, and I wasn't very good at math, but I know 3 out of
Well, it
5.
has to do with veto power though as well, so you gotta remember, there's that process of veto, whether it be a piece of legislation, whatever it may be. So that's why I think that comes into play.
Yeah, but the veto power before, when it was 6, it was 4, which just happened to be a simple majority and also 2/3. But now when it's 5 out of 3, 5 is slightly less than 66 and 2/3, or excuse me, 3 is slightly less than 66 and 2/3, and 4 is significantly more, so.
Well, but in order to override a veto, they need 4, not the simple majority, they need 4 to override a veto.
Well, but the way it was before, it was still a simple majority, it was because a simple majority was 2/3.
Yeah, right.
So the question is.
Am I correct in that?
It's 2/3.
But under the way the charter is right now, does it need 3 or does it need 4 to
It
override?
needs 4.
It needs 4, okay.
Yeah, but there's some,
Okay.
right, but there are some people who say it should be 3, and it's on the list to discuss.
But you know, under the same thing, removal of the finance director, it tells you it takes so many, in the 1999 charter, your finance director under the same 609 removal takes 5 of the 6 votes. That was in 1999. So that's what I'm saying is, it's,
You mean when I wanted to remove the finance director?
if you're 1999, I got the charters way back. It says it took 5 out of the 6 to remove them. There were 6 people on council then.
Well, DeLillo at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I hired him. I wanted to take him out.
Okay, all right, Are we done with, Article 6 for right now? We move on to Article 7, which is the service department, and I think, as I said before, I think we're all in agreement that those issues that we talked about in finance that also apply in service are on the list, and we don't really need to bring them up differently or individually again. But any thoughts on Article 7?
Two things. This is new. I think this is just a leftover from when actually Jim Lawton was the service director way
What are you
back
talking
at
about?
535
Okay.
in 1980, in the late 70s, when Jim Lutz was mayor and Stu was mayor, and he had a full-time job. H says, assist the mayor in the performance of the mayor's duties that may be delegated by the mayor. Technically, the mayor can delegate his duties to anybody, now the service department. So because we truly have a service department employee and not an administrative service, I think that line would be open for consideration for delete. Just delete that. I don't think it has any impact because,
I
you
agree.
know.
Okay.
That would be H, correct?
Yes,
That's
H.
H.
Yes, 535. You're absolutely right.
Delete that? Yes.
Okay.
So, say that again, which was it,
535 H.
Yeah, Section H.
And I think you're right about Jimmy Lott.
Yeah. Because he used to do everything, you know?
Sure, well, at that time, the mayor was truly a part-time
I know.
position, and the mayor wasn't here.
I know.
And Jim did everything. And then the other thing, which I don't think it needs a charter amendment, but I do think it should be noted on line, actually 528, the service director should be responsible for except construction, maintenance, or roads and stuff. Well, as we all know, stormwater has taken on a life of its own. Stormwater's not mentioned in there. I don't know if we wanna include it, I'm not sure. I wanna do a charter amendment for
It
it.
says drains.
Well, it says storm sewers, it says
Storm sewer
ditches too,
facility.
Well,
so
storm
I,
sewers are different than
No,
stormwater.
but it says drains and ditches.
I know, I'm not asking to do a charter amendment, I just wanted to point it out.
Yeah, I don't think we need to.
I,
Good point.
I have a comment about 514 or 513, qualifications and term.
Okay.
A 5, back to 5?
No,
Article
Article 7.
7, 5.
Line
Line
5.
5.
I'm
14.
sorry.
We got, ahead there. The state of Ohio has a whole lot more items that they assign responsibility to the Director of Public Service today as opposed to 5 or even 10 years ago. Specific things about competitive bidding, procurement activities, and I think the qualifications listed here, frankly, are quite weak, especially in relation to, if you back up and look at what we were just talking about in terms of the finance department's qualifications. You know,
the who to finance?
Director of Finance shall have knowledge of municipal accounting, taxation, budgets, and financial control. I guess what I'm getting at is the service department today, the service departments in municipalities today have the responsibility for procurement. Nearly 100%. The finance departments today are providing oversight. They're not handling the bidding. In most municipalities anymore, that's all handled by the service department. So I guess where I'm going is you know, I think we need to strengthen the qualification requirements for a service director. I think their skill set needs to be a little broader perhaps than what's described right here.
And I think that be the case for the finance director more so than
I
the service
don't
director.
disagree.
And I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
The service director, he is, got to go through this finance department to get where he wants to go in any event. So we don't have enough teeth, if you will, in this finance department. And then he should be the one has more knowledge and has certification and what have you in the finance department. The director of service he's gotta take everything back to the mayor, he's gotta take everything back to the law department, and then to the finance department. So he's got like a 3-check point there. He's not gonna get anything through without those approvals through that process, if you will.
David, you're talking procurement, or are you talking your knowledge base of the general functions of this, of?
I'm talking
Is
about
that-
being consistent with state law and the state requirements today
So you're talking about like knowing,
for contracts,
maintenance
bidding,
and-
procurement.
oh, more of that end, okay.
Let me give you another issue too here
Yes.
that maybe will help clarify some of this. Unfortunately, when all this was written, it was back in a time when we don't have all the certifications and things like that. But Macedonia, and I can tell you that over my years, I wanted to hire the best that I could find out in the industry, from one community to another. And when I would reach out for like a finance director that had a lot of abilities, if you will, and a lot of certification, I couldn't afford them. I couldn't bring them to Macedonia. And so when you find somebody that's really qualified out there, their number for that position is too high for us to grab a hold of it. So we had a very broad, under the charter, very broad certification, if you will, of what that person can do. I think that the finance department is probably the most important part of your operation of your city.
I
That's why
disagree. I disagree. I think if you look at state law, the most important director's position today, currently, is the service department. That's where all the bidding occurs, that's where all the purchasing occurs. The actual production of a purchase order is the finance
Well,
department's
let me qualify
responsibility.
that as well, because the county there's been a large push that the fiscal officer of Summit County be a CPA. That was pushed for the longest time, if you were keeping track of that, you remember that, Peggy. So finally, we do have a fiscal officer who is a CPA. And it's important, because that person is a certified public accountant, they're in the position, they're educated, they understand the position, and they are in the control of how they review assess your taxes, they collect your taxes, they do a lot of things throughout the county. That position, anything that goes on in the county has to go through the finance department, as similar to a city. In our city of a size of this nature, the finance director has to qualify how much is available for the spending. Everything goes through the finance department. I mean, everything. When you talk about the finance director or the service department director, he's gonna come back to the mayor is gonna go to the finance director, and they're gonna see whether or not they have funds available so that they can do this particular job, and that finance director's gotta certify those numbers. So I think he's more important, in my opinion. I know you may be saying, but operating this city for as long as I did.
But you would want to club the charter and say they have to have a certain level of.
Well, that's an issue.
Because at some point, maybe they're gonna be too expensive, what we define.
That's why I brought that issue up.
So,
I don't know, but I do feel that that position may require us to spend more money. And so we need to understand that if you're reaching out to get somebody that's more qualified, then you will understand that if you do a change in your charter, that you may have to go out and spend more money to get a qualified individual in that position.
I think, I don't disagree with that statement. I think that's probably accurate. I guess I'm not criticizing what is here. I do understand the history of what is here. For example, service departments, historically, the guy comes up through the ranks and he ends up being the head, and he may have, not even have a high school education, okay? But what I'm saying is today, because of state law and the requirements associated with the things that a service department director has to do, I think that our charter ought to have some basic qualifications for each of the department's directors. And this seems relatively strong for the finance department and relatively weak for the service department, is what I'm saying. And I guess what I'm suggesting is, or asking, is should we be looking at strengthening this language because of the current responsibilities of a service director as required by the state? And I'll be happy to bring in this stuff, next time we meet, so you can see the extent of the and there are responsibilities that our service department or service director has right now that I guarantee he doesn't even know he's responsible for.
Joe,
They're being done by other departments or other people right now. That's fine, we may be functioning fine as a small town, but what if?
I think it should go for all department heads. I mean, we're paying these people $100,000. How do we know how qualified the rec center lady is? How do we know how, according to what I understand, the building department guy isn't even certified, unless I'm mistaken.
Well, I believe the charter was changed to allow that, though, the last time. I
I was under the impression that he's supposed to be.
The only thing that was a charter change was the language of the title.
Commissioner.
Correct.
Right,
And
follows
that-
state
and that-
law.
That allowed him to
Follows
not
state law.
have to have certification.
Why do we have a guy making that much money who's not even certified?
I don't know.
I mean, shouldn't the rec director know, about chlorine and about this and about that, and the guy patching the street, don't put this in, cause in the wintertime it don't work, don't plant these trees, cause they're gonna die.
I didn't
And
come here
I
to
think
talk or criticize about individuals.
I didn't
okay?
mention any names,
Yeah,
I just
my
said
point about
departments.
this is consistent with what you're saying,
Yeah.
okay?
All
I would say
departments.
the same thing would apply for the building department, as it would apply for the service department,
Right.
as it would apply for the finance department. Should there be basic qualifications established by charter,
Yes, you're right,
not
that's what I
by
meant.
mayor and not by council, by charter, for those basic positions? And maybe the answer is no, maybe it shouldn't be that way, because that's,
Well, I'll just
the public.
say this though, just generally. There are certain positions that I think you can agree that are not as important as other positions, so let's say that, if you will. But when you do put into the charter the qualifications of an individual, then you need to hire under that, and you may not be able to afford what you find.
But you could also keep the ordinance, or the charter as it is, that service director shall be qualified by training and experience to direct the operation of the department of public safety. There's also ordinances that can be passed that are that are easier to change, because what happens if we find out that we really can't afford him with X degree.
Well, that's what I would find all the time when I was
Right.
out hiring a new finance director. And the interesting thing about in this arena, if you will, the municipal arena, maybe you know this as well, is that when you're out, you advertise for the position. If that number is the right number, you're gonna have everybody from every community jumping ship to come to you, because your number is where it should be, for them to move from another community. But if that number is not, you're not gonna get the top of the crop, if you will, of individuals coming to get the job. They're gonna go where the dollars are, and that's what we find in this industry. So you'll find one community that advertises and puts out a real high number, and everybody runs to that community to get to that job.
Yeah, but Joe, you remember when you were mayor, and I've got the picture of that, you fixed a street the last 10 years. Today, they fixed 10 streets the last 6 months. The amount of wasted money, and I can talk to my street, and I'll bring it, Dicketown will complain.
But that has nothing to do
Oh,
with
yeah,
the
oh, wait,
charter.
yes, it does. You're talking about a qualified person. We're wasting money. The amount of money they wasted on streets, they could hire, if like Joe said, a person wants 150,000 is qualified, because when they did my street, Dicketown complained that was the wrong thing to do, and they did it anyhow. 6 months later, all that money was wasted, it's falling apart. So I would rather pay somebody 150,000 who could say, this is the proper way, we'll fix the street like he did, it lasted 10 years. Today, it lasts 6 months. We're wasting money. We ought to take that money and hire somebody who could say, this is the proper way to fix a hole. We don't have that today. I give Joe credit, when he fixed those streets, they lasted 10 years. Today, my street, 6 months later, if you want the pictures, they did all the patchwork, it fell apart in about 2 months.
Your point, I think what you're supporting what I'm suggesting, especially about the service director, okay? Skill in writing specifications or understanding specifications, understanding bidding requirements, qualifying contractors and verifying those contractors aren't simply, taking you out to lunch and saying, hey, give me the business.
That doesn't
And,
happen.
validating that, they deliver. All of those things, I think, are things that need to be within the skill set of this position. And I guess I feel pretty strongly that the charter ought to have minimum qualifications for these positions.
But if you put those,
And those-
may I just say something? If you put those qualifications in, that you're gonna be able to do bids, you're gonna be able to do contracts, you're gonna be able to do all these things, you put up.
I'm not saying, say those things. I'm saying that we make this language consistent with the states.
Well, all right, well, whatever that is, but I mean,
Whatever
no
that
matter
is.
what, no matter what you put in there, it's